Now, Kenya is home to one of the most established innovation in Africa. And today we are having Dr. Tony Mwansa, who is the CEO of Kenya National Innovation Agency. Thank you, Dr. Tony Mwansa, for joining us concerning this particular issue of innovation. Kindly tell us, what does Kenya National Innovation Agency do here in the country?
So thanks very much for having me here. Kenya National Innovation Agency was established by an Act of Parliament of 2013 and then kind of became operational around 2014, 2015 thereabout, and rolled out a number of initiatives 2016 thereabout. And it's been running with an acting CEO, and I became a first substantive CEO 3 months ago. So the agency was basically developed, set up to support the nurturing and growth of the innovation system across the country. And when you say innovation system, it means a number of elements, from knowledge all the way to be transformed into innovations, products, services that are socio-economic value. So at the end of the day, our measure of success is how much did knowledge translate to betterment of life.
Yeah. All right. Now we talk about innovations, and here in Kenya, it is a home to one of the most established innovation in the ecosystem here in Africa. And looking even at Kenyatta University, this particular time of COVID-19 pandemic, they have come up with many innovations that have helped in the fight against COVID-19. So the question has been, what is the procedure of finding help when it comes to innovation? What is the step that they should take to reach out to Kenya National Innovation Agency as a board or as an organization that is set up to help innovators here in the country?
Okay, so thanks very much. That's a good question, and many people wonder how to go about that. And we aspire as Kenya to try and educate as many people as possible and kind of guide that processes. You see, that is intellectual property. You're basically talking about intellectual property. And then you have 3 phases around it. One is the creation of that intellectual property. So you're like, okay, I've seen a problem, I have a solution, I have an idea that can work. And then there is a protection of that intellectual property to make sure it's safeguarded and aligned to you and so forth. And then there is the exploitation, because you can protect something, but then if you haven't taken it to market, then so what, So now, not one person can enable, or not one organization can enable you to do all those elements.
Yeah, sure.
So the idea is that you need to know whom to work with at different times. Now, Kenya National Innovation Agency does have some funding that it supports innovative ideas at early stage, so to speak. Testing, validating, and proving concepts and so forth. And for us, we make sure that it is not just about the money, but you also need the right mentorship at that stage to think through the value proposition, the business model, and so forth. But then it is important to realize that after that, you're going to need some more support. And that's where private sector is meant more and more to come in. Okay? Now, so the government is very good at taking early risk. Okay? You are in a public institution, for example, you're paying school fees this much, but they're building capacity, so the government kind of subsidizes that, all right? But then thereafter, it's supposed to be someone else. And so in the context of this innovation space, Kenya is looking to grow more and more. We do fund quite a number, grow more and more the pool of the startups and the amount of funds that we're able to give at the early stage of conceptualization and testing. And then we're looking for mechanisms to pipe this into private sector. That's why we have angel investors, that's why we have VCs, venture capitalists, and so on and so forth. And we try to link as much as possible so that this kind of partners help to upscale. You can get grants from other places. You can get, that's why we have competitions, accelerators, by the way. The reason why accelerators exist is to accelerate. So what we may have done is to incubate and then accelerate. And that's why accelerators exist. And that's why Kenya is interested in supporting as many accelerators as possible so that they have best practices, they have the right partnerships, and they have good positions. If I'm in Kisumu, I need to find an accelerator there. I don't have to relocate to Nairobi. And that accelerator needs to be very well plugged to private sectors and VCs and angel investors and so on and so forth. And they have good tools and methodologies and so on and so forth, and coaches and mentors and so forth to help you scale. So let's look at it that way in terms of what happens at the early stage and what happens at the acceleration period. And as we grow Kenya, because it's a young agency, as we grow, we will want to disseminate this information as much as possible in a language that people truly understand, and then the universities become good incubators. all right? And I'm trying to promote this narrative. 4 years, 5 years, 6 years in university is a very good time to prototype, test, validate, and then scale up. Yeah.
Now, talking about that, there has been a concern on the issue of what parameters are used to gauge that this is an innovation, because some have come up with a solution to a problem, but that has not been termed as an innovation per se. So given that you are helping these people at an early stage, what are the parameters of saying that this is indeed an innovation?
So the best way I like answering such questions is by saying, what is innovation? And I have my own little definition. I call it change that adds value. It's change that adds value. And it's got to be filling a gap or solving a certain problem or creating new value, excitement, people become happier, or they save more time, or they move faster, you know, stuff like that. So when we say change that adds value, I didn't quantify the change. I don't know whether it's going to be from A to Z to C to B, whatever. But as long as there's going to be some change and there's going to be some value created. How much value? It's neither here nor there. I don't know. It can be 10 times, 5 times, 4 times faster, whatever that is. So let's start from there. So in other words, there's a little bit of subjectivity as to the extent to which this will be innovative. But it is also important to appreciate that we barely know. No one can claim that they know that this is going to be valuable. But you've got to test it. And this is the answer. If someone is going to be willing to pay for it at some point in time because it relieved their pain or it made their life better, then that is a measure. Because if we create something very nice and no one wants to finally use it and pay for it, then it's just a hobby. It's just a nice thing to do. It was fun. Or it's a good way of learning. We tested, yeah, we saw it can work. That would be great. But if ultimately it becomes an enterprise, someone pays for it, someone buys it, someone uses it, then that is, you know, what we are looking for. And what we can try to do at this point in time is to gauge that this has the potential to go there. Now, it just takes experience, perception. You ask, have you talked to users? Have you actually seen this pain in the society? How many people are likely to be impacted by this kind of a challenge? You ask those kind of questions, and you start feeling like, yeah, this could, all right? So there are people experienced in doing that. So, this one could, and there are models that are used, like business model, value proposition, design. We've got tools that you can use to get a better sense that, yeah, this potentially can impact people. And then we have to take the risk and fund a number, knowing that some of them will collapse. They may never see the light of day, and that's normal. Then a few of them will see, and it's normal like a funnel. So we start with a big number, we try to narrow down, you get to a certain point, you fund this, and you know, like somewhere along the way, only probably a few will make it. And that's the general nature of the industry.
All right, so let's now talk about the issue of innovators having the challenge or a risk factor of losing their innovation due to the issue of copyright, some due to lack of awareness, others due to ignorance. As a Kenya National Innovation Agency, what are you doing to sort of solve this particular issue that is facing many, many innovators due to the big giants who want to steal their ideas?
Okay, excellent. You actually started by the question in a very nice way, that due to ignorance, due to lack of awareness, and so on and so forth. So, you know, having ideas and concepts and so on and so forth is one thing. And when other people find them before you protect them and kind of guard them properly, they can take advantage of that. And if they protect, then the ownership kind of like migrates. So very, very valid point. Now, as a national agency, our mandate is to try and make sure that we can, you know, manage these kind of issues. And the best way we know is by developing appropriate incubation hubs in institutions where the people can be found. So if it is, I have visited Kenyatta University. That's why we have the Chandaria Incubation Center, and they've got a technology transfer office in there. And my job is to try and make sure that that office is well equipped, and it has the tools, it has the manpower, it has the processes to help the young people, and then it has an awareness mechanism that makes sure that the students access and they can be served so that they can protect. Next is that it is my responsibility to make sure the Vice Chancellor knows that the students are losing ideas if they don't protect them. And therefore I say one is that we have to ensure that in the curriculum, we have to try and expose students more and more to intellectual property protection. And then we tell them to protect the intellectual property, you don't need to go to an agency called KIPI or Kenya Copyright Board. No. Go to Chandaria Incubation Center, and these people are equipped and empowered. They will assist you. They will be your linkage to the national entities. And one of our goals, I mean, I've been there 3 months, and I've kind of set a target that by the time we finish about 4 or 5 years, we'd like to have an incubation center in every university, in every not a village, but let's say a sub-county level. And other ministries are also supporting this kind of approach that, Ministry of ICT, industrialization. Let's decentralize as much as possible the focal, when we have all these centers, the Huduma centers, such information should be available in such places. So the question is how to practically decentralize. And one of those is academic institutions, TVETs, universities, and so on and so forth.
All right. Now let's bring the discussion closer home. Here in Kenyatta University, we had the students who came up with a ventilator, which is called the TIGBA vent. But now, once it was certified by KEBS, they have not been able to get to the next stage of mass production. And the question has been, are stakeholders not really helping these particular guys to push their innovation forward? Or what does Kenya National Innovation Agency come into the picture? Do you push private stakeholders or private investors to get into the picture? How then do young people, when they are stuck due to finances, get to the next stage, which you're calling acceleration? Yeah.
So, and that's a tricky one. And part of the reason why the agency was also established was to try and figure out how to address those kind of issues. Now, it's a young agency, of course, and we're building the systems to enable that work. Kenya did fund, the early stage, all right, the validation stage. Now, the scaling part has some challenges. But let's look at the business model. In other words, what's the business model for that product? Is it a startup that will produce many of them and distribute? Okay, if you're distributing, who is buying? Yeah, sure. That's the next question. Who is buying? What's a business model? And that needs to be cracked very well, because then you get the right partner to help support the scaling. If it is to sell these items into institutions, and yes, people are going to buy, then someone is able to say, as an investor, I'm very interested in this. What is the market potential? How many hospitals are you see, a VC is looking at how do I get my money back after I put it? Yeah. That's... Yeah, I've invested. I want to get my money back. So I haven't spent time. I spent time at that stage, but I haven't gotten enough time to spend to think of what is the business model so that you can sell. Because the next thing we need to sell here is the business model. If I look for any investor, it's the business model. They're like, okay, I'm going to put so much money. Maybe I'll take 5% equity, and you're going to sell so many of them by this time, and I'm going to get my money back plus this interest. Those are the questions now. That might probably not be the best route for this. It could be some industrialist comes around and says, from a CSR perspective, I like what you guys are doing. We're going to produce so many of them, and we're going to distribute them into so many hospitals. I don't need any money back. I'm just doing public good. That's a business model. Okay? So the question is, who is connected to them now to help move to the next level, depending on what the business model is? And as Kenya, as we go along, we are looking for mechanisms of harvesting as many partners as possible on this side, all right, who then we connect. And then I'm trying to create what we are calling an innovation bridge. It's more like an innovation marketplace. Traditionally in a marketplace, if you create something, you take it to the market. And who comes there? It's buyers. All right? There are different types of buyers. There's one who will come and say, I want 3 potatoes. And another say, I want a whole gunia, and so on and so forth. Do we have good digital marketplace? I am trying to build one as Kenya, because technology can enable us. You just gave one example. There must be 100 of them across the country. And it is difficult to study each of them and go physically and look at what's your business model. I know somebody who might be interested. But if we built a digital marketplace where they all can come and present, this is what we have, and this is where we are looking to go, and then you bring as many partners, financials as possible. They also log in, and some algorithms help you to link. This one might work with this one. You receive an alert. You follow through. We help build the necessary partnerships, joint ventures. Sometimes it could be a joint venture. Sometimes it could be a startup. Sometimes it could be just scaling up. And so on and so forth. And I think that we can help. we can help. But it's just that it's a young agency, so making it steps forward, but we have a sense of a vision where we're going.
Talking about being a young agency, what are some of the challenges or obstacles that you face as an agency as you try to create awareness, or as you're trying to help some of this young innovation? What are some of the hurdles that have sort of derailed you back 4 years on?
Okay, so I could speak as an agency, or I could speak as myself as a first substantive CEO. So as an agency, being young, you know, the process typically is that a government agency takes time to establish, you know, the right instruments for human resource, you know, get staff seconded to you, have the budget allocation to facilitate you to do what you have to do, and so on and so forth. So there points two things: funding, because it's a process to finally get the resources that you need, and second is the manpower, and it takes quite some time to establish the right instruments and then get the manpower, and that manpower is a function of the resources that you have to pay. Now, at the initial stages, you have to depend a lot on secondment of people being sent to you to assist you for a period of time. So I've been there for a few months now, and we've established our roadmap, we've got our strategies, we've got our performance contracts, and so on and so forth. We're still lean on staff, but we've begun the process to request for recruitments and enhance budgets and so forth. But at the same time, you also realize you are in COVID, and everybody tells you, sometimes come a little slow, yeah? Come a little slow. We are working on it, and we have to get our priorities right and so forth. But through partnerships, we've started attracting you know, support, and I'm seeing that in the coming 1 year or so, we'll have scaled a lot. Then I also have to say that KeNIA cannot achieve much if institutions don't achieve much. I mean, we're not going to run accelerators. Yeah. Accelerators will be in the industry. Exactly. So all we will do is to try and make sure we have the right policies and national environment, attitudes, you know, educate as many people as possible about this, inform policymakers, create drafts of policies, be present in the counties and regional development agencies and educate, and then, you know, there are development partners who are starting innovation hubs, make sure we have good standards and best practices and so forth. So you're catalyzing, you're creating an appropriate environment, and then educating the younger people, making sure institutions like higher education have diffused the mindsets around intellectual property exploitation, and make sure the hubs are working in there very well. That is what we're going to do. And of course, we don't need a lot of manpower. We need some critical manpower that then helps establish this. And then the other method we're going to be using a lot is to work with partners as possible to give us the kind of manpower that we can use. I don't have to employ in order to have an intellectual property officer. No, I can ride on an intellectual property officer found in Kenyatta University, and we work on a certain relationship, and they provide that support.
Sure.
So we are innovating also in the way we function.
In creating manpower. Now, finally, as we finalize this particular discussion, we have seen the Cabinet Secretary for ICT, Joe Mucheru, say that they are working to support innovation. Given that this is a digital era, we are coming up with a lot of innovations. But the question has been that the funds have not been trickling down to the young innovators, and therefore the young people have been decrying that they have been left behind. They're not receiving support. As the Kenya National Innovation Agency, what are you doing to bridge this particular gap? Okay,
so, you know, funding, especially from government, has its own processes and procedures. You know, you got to have budget allocation, and that budget allocation is based, I mean, funds allocation is based on some budgets, and then someone has to be convinced somewhere, there's a lawmaker or somebody who's going to be convinced that, yeah, it's good to put this money there, all right? Now, for that person to do that, they've got to be educated and appreciate and see the value of what exactly you're saying. So as a young agency, we've begun that process of, you know, elaborating and educating and informing as many partners as possible so that people understand, you know, why we need to do this and how we are going to make sure that there is value back to the same government, all right? So that's one element where we're trying to, you know, get people to appreciate so that when we do our budgeting at national level, we're able to balance these things out and so on and so forth and make sure these resources are allocated. The second part is, you know, you can have the resources, but you need the right intermediaries, you know, to get those funds through the right person. Because at national level, I cannot pretend to you that I'm going to distribute this across 47 counties and make sure all these 10,000 youth are going to get what they need. So you need the right intermediaries. And sometimes this is what we have to do as Kenya. That's why I came to Kenyatta University, look at the way Chandaria operates, an incubation center. I'm like, okay, what's your reach? You have so much reach. And how can we support you? You have the right programs? Because I can get you the money, and I said money is not always the problem. Do you have good mechanisms for harvesting the right ideas? Do these young people come in proper teams? You know, I can come in as one person with a good idea, but that doesn't mean I'll make a good business. I can receive the money and then I get confused. So you have the right systems in place to evaluate these ideas and make sure they are the right teams, and you have the right capacity building framework that ensure you educate these young people on how to budget, how to plan, how to do value proposition design, how to test the idea, how to market, and so on and so forth. So money is only but a small component of the whole process. So as Kenya, I'm looking around, I'm like, okay, this hub, they're very well organized. This incubation center, they're very well organized. These ones, I think, let's wait a bit. So then I have the resources, I'm able to channel the resources to the right partners so that then they do my job is to follow through. I'm like, did you say, are you doing what is? So I don't have to deal with the innovator, I deal with the intermediaries. And we need a good pool of that.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Tony Mwansa. What can be your parting shot as you finalize?
So the parting shot is Kenya National Innovation Agency was established to support the commercialization of ideas and research and so forth, and then grow the national innovation ecosystem. And we measure our success by the socio-economic impact that we create in people's lives. And, you know, globally, countries that have advanced a lot is those that have invested in innovation. And we have to build a national system. And we are looking for partners, because government can't do it alone, along the entire value chain of innovation, as many partners as we can to support issues of capacity building, funding, awareness, business model validation, intellectual property protection, and so on and so forth. So partners, partners, partners.